Thank you very much, Dominic. Thank you, Solveig. Good morning, everyone. Like the speaker before, like Solveig said, I think we can all very much agree on the dire need of integration in Germany. But the truth is that we have a terrible track record. All the numbers are really discouraging at the moment. About a third of the German population has a migration background. They're doing worse than the rest of the population in pretty much every aspect. More unemployment, less education, and so forth. When we had refugees coming in large numbers in the 90s, it took them about 5 years for half of them to get employment. After 10, a lot still didn't have employment. So our track record isn't great. There's a lot of bad news. But the good news is you're all here to talk about this probably most challenging issue of our time in Germany. And I would really like you to take part in the discussion today also. We'll open up for question later. And we have a really great panel up here. The question, of course, is how do we use international solutions, or what lessons can we apply for Germany? And J.Leu is an amazing partner in this topic because she's been integrating refugees in the American labor market for 15 years. Welcome. We also have Alexander A.Geiser here, who's founded the first German initiative of the business sector to integrate refugees into the labor market. And we'll also talk to I.Missmahl, who's educated and trained refugees in Afghanistan and is using these lessons and applying them to the German market. So when we bring the best international solutions to Germany, I would like to ask Jane, you say Germany can become a world leader on this if we do it like it's your job. How do we do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I'm here. So I founded this organization, Upwardly Global, about 15 years ago that works on integrating skilled immigrants into the workforce. And so there's some lessons to share, but more than anything, I showed up because I'm a social entrepreneur, so I'm highly opportunistic. And what I see here is this really great opportunity for systemic change, because there's nothing like urgency to get people to the table. And when I look around and I see the business leaders at the table, the government looking for innovation, the citizen sector really on fire, I just think that you have this opportunity to create a system for the 21st century. In my country, we've been doing this for 200 years. It's a little bit organic. It kind of got pieced together. And I believe in competition. And I feel like what gets created here will actually force my country to get better at this. Because we are all going to be in a competition for labor very soon. You're in it now, and we're going to be in it soon.
What were the critical factors of success for Upwardly Global?
Yeah, well, I mean, really, so most of our work, we work with both the job seekers and the employers, but we put as much time on the employers as we do on the job seekers, on the refugees and the immigrants, because everyone's always trying to fix them, but really the problem lies with the employers many times. They don't have policies that are inclusive. And if you want to really understand a country's cultural norms, look at how you find a job. It's like mired in cultural norm. So does it matter if you have a really firm handshake? Does that make you a good social worker? Does it make you a good teacher? But that's how we screen a lot of people out in the US. So some of our best practices are really helping companies find their business opportunity and really driving at how they're going to create practices that are inclusive instead of exclusive.
Alexander, when you founded the initiative of businesses that will sort of take on this job of integrating refugees in the German market, what has been your approach?
I think the approach started with responsibility. It wasn't a grand, and maybe to take 2 steps back, it wasn't a grand plan, and I think that's also my appeal to everybody here. It was essentially a few CEOs talking to each other, and everybody as a human being, as a citizen, looking at the situation and saying, listen, this is our time, and officially it's the government's job, right? It's not company's job to do this, but it is our job as well. And I think Germany, and I think that needs to be said, I'm half Canadian, so Germany did a fantastic job. The way society came out and embraced the challenge was fantastic. And a lot of business leaders were thinking, well, listen, society is doing this, we're doing this privately, and the family, relatives, so on and so forth. business needs to help as well. And obviously, and I think Solveig made a fantastic point earlier, there she is, about ultimately, obviously, jobs and finding a way to essentially create a way of living for your family is the key to integrating into family, because then you're a valuable member of society. And what we found is a lot of CEOs pretty quickly agreed and said, we need to do something, and we also need to send a signal. And I think that was really important as well, because that wasn't popular. So when it was launched, this was just after the Cologne situation. All of you are familiar with it. It wasn't a popular thing to do, but these CEOs essentially said, listen, we need to send a signal, right? And this is acceptable behavior. This is what we want to do. So we got 36 CEOs together in their companies. All of them made a public pledge and said, here's our project. This is what we're going to do, despite of everything that's going on, and we can't sit this out. And that was the big signal. And up to now, we've nearly tripled the amount of companies that are with us and growing steadily. So anybody who wants to join, you're happy to join.
How do you measure your success?
I think it's multidimensional. The one thing is obviously actually showing the voice, and I think it actually has a huge impact on the discussion in society if you see that the perceived leaders in politics as well as in the business area are standing up publicly and saying this is the right thing to do. It has a real effect on the mainstream opinion.
That's the PR, right? So
no. Well, I can give you the feedback. Listen,
yeah.
I think our project office in the first month received about 1,000 hate mails per week. And these weren't hate mails that are, you guys are idiots. These were hate mails in a completely different category. And we kept on going, and interestingly enough, over the period of time, the hate mail started shrinking. Now, it's a very limited community, and the support mail started increasing, right? So I think that's something, if you look at that, I think it's more than PR. It is really, are you making an impact on the overall discussion? And I think the overall discussion is important. What is right and what is wrong, what is acceptable, what is non-acceptable is reality, and I think we need to deal with that. If you're asking about success, listen, any company we can inspire that's currently not doing anything, that jumps on, and that's what we're doing. We're providing transparency on the one side. We're showing everybody what all these companies are doing. So any company can just go, and they are doing that. They're looking at it, and they're like, that's easy. Because a lot of companies are standing there saying, where do we start, right? I mean, that was really the challenge in the first months. They didn't know where to start. They didn't know what to do. Now they've got a platform they can go and say, oh, that company, my competitor is doing X, we can do 2X. And that's actually what's happening. So listen, the success for me is already there. There's no master plan to now take this, 1,000X. We'll keep on growing it. We'll keep on inspiring companies and being part of the debate.
Inge, you have a lot of experience working with the mental health of refugees as a prerequisite also for enabling them to get to work. How do you transfer, you've worked on, I think, 110,000 people in Afghanistan with traumas. How do you transfer this work to the German labor market?
Well, we thought that when this started last fall, we should use our expertise, which we have gained in the last 12 years in Afghanistan, but also in China, Haiti, and Sri Lanka, and apply that knowledge about how to deal with a high level of stress and traumatic experience and other psychosocial stresses. And we revised the curriculum which we had developed and with which we had trained in Afghanistan 350 psychosocial counselors who are now all integrated into the health care system. And we started to train people here. So we train refugees to become psychosocial counselors, that they can help their own people being here to reduce their level of stress and to regain influence over their own lives and get out of this feeling of feeling victimized and being powerless.
You talk about trauma therapy as a prerequisite for work, but how much can work help to actually go through the trauma?
Well, I think it's both. Both are necessary factors, yeah. Because the main point for people arriving here, and perhaps we can leave in the moment the word trauma more or less out. It's difficult experiences or possibly traumatizing experiences. The best medicine is to feel as a valuable member of society and to feel that you experience yourself in a meaningful way acting. And this is possible if you can have a work and if you can, for instance, provide for your family.
I think your one part that really goes towards that goal is you also educate people to become psychosocial counselors themselves, right? Can you talk a little bit about that experience in Germany?
Yeah, we have now in the moment one course in Berlin and one in Erfurt in Thüringen, and it is very interesting. People from 10 different nations are sitting together, and it's a 3 months intensive course where people are together all day. And in the morning, it's knowledge and it's intervention skills, and all afternoon is self-experience. So you have people here doing actually kind of a piecework because they are sitting together on one table from different ethnic groups or from different political parties, which normally would perhaps not talk to each other. And it's a wonderful way to change something on a very individual level. And those people, when they are going to be psychosocial counselors and provide help to other people, they will certainly draw back on that skill.
Integration is, of course, not a one-way street. We talked about that before. We will have to change too. Alexander, how do you think we have to change in order to allow for integration? I mean, you're talking a little bit about Wir zusammen, sort of as you mentioned that the hate mail was declining, that you want to change the mentality. What do you think has to happen in the companies themselves?
Well, I think it varies from smaller companies to larger companies. But I think the first step is always to move away from the up and down, right? I'm above you, you're below, you're seeking my help, and I am above, I'm the one with the power, and that's how you humanize it. Where we see companies being incredibly successful is when they bring their employees together with refugees, with guests in our country, right, that want to stay here for a long time, and all of a sudden they start saying, hey, it's a human being, right? It's a real human being. And then I think the rest is actually very simple. So really breaking down those contact barriers, and we all know how it is, right? I mean, everybody has a prejudice, and you need to break them down. And once you've broken them down, we heard the statistics earlier, everybody is acutely aware how much labor is actually required in this country. So there's huge opportunity, right, to integrate. I mean, it would be worse, we'd be in a different situation. If we would be here, we'd have 5% unemployment and 0 open jobs. But fact is, we have 1 million open jobs right now, right? A lot of companies urgently need people. They can't grow because we're not getting enough people, right? We don't have enough labor. So there's a huge interest to actually create that, proximity and break down the barriers.
Jane, you had a slide on that. Do you want to show that?
Pull up that one slide. I think it's good to see the visual on just where the supply and the demand curve converges. We've already hit that point where your labor demand is much higher than your supply. And in that gap, there's so much opportunity. To pick up on what you were saying, Alexander, I mean, we're all about helping employees of companies find their self-interest in getting to be more competent at cross-cultural management. And so many of our employer partners actually pay us significantly to bring their high-potential employees in contact with refugee job seekers so that they can learn how to do cross-cultural interviewing, how to do cross-cultural feedback. And then those high potentials are the ones that company staffs out to their global locations, which is surely a path to promotion. So it's highly in their self-interest to get to be good at how you do cross-cultural work. It makes their jobs better.
How do you think the German mindset has to change in order to enable that?
I mean, finding your self-interest, like where are the markets you're trying to get into? How is having this new group of people going to help you get into new markets, either new consumer markets here in Germany, new markets abroad? If we have Brazilian job seekers, they get snapped up like that because every American company wants to get into the Brazil market. So trying to find that place where, because I worked here in Germany, and I feel like once Germans find their self-interest, they've got efficiency, they've got know-how, they know how to roll out systems. It's going to be much better than what we have in the US. So it's just finding, and moving away from the humanitarian thing, which is great, but the refugees don't want your charity. They want to work, and they want you to value them for their work. That's the shift that I think will have to happen.
I think to just add to that and build on that, I think one thing that is important, just if you're looking at big business, German big business, this is, the nation is called the exporting world champion, right? The people working in companies in Germany tend to already work in a very international, you call it multi-social, multicultural background. That's already the reality in businesses. Mm-hmm. So if we were a very closed economy, the challenge would be much bigger. Right, it would be nearly impossible. I think also from a psychological perspective. But fact is, most companies already are multicultural. They are multisocial, and people are on the phone doing business with people in China, in Africa, wherever they are. So this is actually, I think, the mindset issue is A, proximity, and B, when you get to the German Tugenden, in quotation marks, where there is some kind of arrogance of this is our way, that's why we're successful, right? And everybody kind of conform to that. And Inge, you have some interesting points on that. I find with adapting to that, I think it will be important, A, for us to open up a little bit more, but also B, and I think it'll be a key to success for those who are here to very quickly adapt and understand this is what makes this nation desirable, this is what makes this nation and workforce successful, and adapt. I think that's also going to be very important.
Can I say something like that? So the same is true for what we are doing. So I find it very interesting. We gained the expertise in Afghanistan mainly. We apply it now here in Germany, and all people here would like to apply that back in their own home countries again, yes? That's an explicit wish of them. And I think what all you said now, it is opening up to dialogue. It's not you and me, it is an exchange of psychosocial competency. It is to explore the sensitivities, the cultural taboos, and how can we interact and work in the best possible way together and profit from each other's strong points. And this dialogue means two sides. So.
Yeah, I think when we talk about integrating international solutions, we're still, you're talking about opportunity and we're still talking about obligation. So maybe that's the way, the way we have to come. Now we have a little bit of time left, and I think we would all be really happy to take questions from you to either one of the panelists over there.
Hi, my name is Ava Rappaport. I have a house. In my house are living 15 unaccompanied minors. So I have experience with that, and I have two questions. First of all, I see what incredible input has to be done with them to get through that trauma. They have daily therapy, they have German courses, they try to go to school. It takes them months and years. So my first question is, what program is done to give it not only to 15, but to give this sustainable integration programs to a bigger group of people? That's my first question, and I don't know who is going to answer that. My second question is, who is going to educate our youngsters to learn how to communicate on one level with them? Because this is a big problem, and it's a project of mine I'm just working on, to try to educate kids to have no prejudice against them and to work with them.
Thank you.
Okay. Inge, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, one thing I could say is that I think we have to change our wording. Yeah? So far we are integrating the refugees, and I think it is active integration dialogues. So that is one part which has to, the awareness has to be there, and the consciousness that this is also not only needed, but also very interesting and rewarding, because we broaden our whole experience. That was question number 2, and your question number 1. Well, that is a challenging task. I don't think that there is an immediate answer like this. I mean, what we are trying to do is to expand the availability of psychosocial counseling services for everybody online. But this will also last a little bit till we have trained enough people that we can meet all the demands.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add to that. I think the technology aspect of what you're doing is critical to scale the solutions to the size of the problem. And we saw with Upwardly Global that we were sort of doing hand-to-hand, one by one. And once we built a really robust tech platform that had a lot of online learning integrated, we went from serving 1,000 a year to 3,000 and moving on quickly. And we also found that sort of self-directed, we were really skeptical. Like we were like, oh, we're never going to get anybody placed in jobs once we go online with this. And we actually found out that the refugees were able to do more self-directed work, and if they didn't understand a chapter, they could go through it 20 times, and if something was very familiar, they could move through it. Whereas when we had them in classes kind of going lockstep, we didn't get the same kind of results. So, I really encourage you to think about how technology enables things, but in a huge scale. And I mean, I'm from Silicon Valley, so I love the apps, but I think the apps kind of have limited utility unless they're really designed to understand the problem and get to the scale and really connect to the demand. So like in the employment market, the employers should be designing those apps, not the supply side.
Maybe one general perspective on it. I think you'll see this going in different phases, right? I mean, the challenge is unfortunately unforeseen. Now we can all have a long discussion whether or not we should have foreseen it, but it did hit us unforeseen. Secondly, we have about 1.3 million people who entered the country. We have about 680,000 volunteers who are still acting on a daily basis. So the response on behalf of the population has been absolutely fantastic, and that's buying time, right? Then we have a systemic change, and I think we really need to look at that. There are countries who essentially do for lack of a better word or term, a ghetto building strategy, right? Try to really create big ghettos. And I think Germany's chosen a very right way here of saying, listen, we're distributing across society because we really want to, and I need to stick with the word, integrate into society. And that's easier done if you break them up and essentially put them into society. Now, government and essentially the systems that we as a nation have to deal with the challenge just takes more time, right? The response time is just slower. So I think giving the government some necessary time, they've passed material accords, they've put billions and billions and billions of money against it, but it takes time, right? You need to hire teachers, right? It's a very simple thing. And you can't just, whiz them here and say, let's hire them from Greece or Spain, because they need to speak German. So it does take time.
I would like to add unprepared, not unforeseen. It was very foreseeable, but the government was very unprepared. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, my name is Christina Müller, and I'm highly inspired by a couple of quotes I just heard, which is one, there's an economic necessity to integrate and include. We have seen the facts, scaring and it's foreseeable. Yeah, we're not unprepared, we should be prepared. And there's a social dimension to it as well, from a humanity point of view. I heard as well that German society is very much just executing stuff, execution powerhouse. So my question would be, where Germany as a society and politics and economics and the social setup can learn from other nations as a role model to integrate better and faster in order to deliver up to the standards that we need to achieve on an economic dimension and a social dimension.
Do you want to get into that?
I can share a little bit about how we've worked through the different sectors to kind of unlock the pieces of integration. So for example, when we expanded to our Chicago office, we were invited in by the state of Illinois that looked at sort of the outmigration of a lot of native born, and they said we need to have an attraction strategy for talent. And so they actually put us in touch with someone who works in their certification office, and we went through all the different certifications and looked for these little places where refugees and immigrants would never be able to meet the requirements. So for example, in engineering, it's licensed by state in the US, so it's very complicated. In engineering, you had to have gotten an engineering degree in your home country and had 2 years of work experience before you could sit for the engineering first level certification in the United States. Well, then you've got all these refugees that left right after they finished their schools. You've got a group of people who just don't have 2 years of experience, never going to be able to do it. The state of Illinois said, great, we want to be inclusive, let's get rid of that. And so they normalized some of these certifications to meet that. So, working on just kind of the nuts and bolts, like bureaucratic process, and then also talking, we talk with the White House about what's the future strategy around integration. So you're working on the high, the low, like everywhere in between, and pulling in the various different actors. But you have to understand your system and where the problems are and how you can push on those levers.
You made a really interesting point yesterday also about how Germans are very focused about learning the German language. Everybody should learn German first, and that takes about 10 years. And you were saying maybe we shouldn't be that focused on it. Maybe we can learn German while you work, because that's a great way to learn a language. Maybe you shouldn't be sitting in a classroom for the first 5 years and get really depressed, right?
I agree with that.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Yes, one question regarding that language issue. I have a lot of international friends. Not all of them are refugees. Some are also, they studied abroad. And they have a problem that companies don't want people that don't speak German perfectly in the beginning. And the strongest example was one, she studied IT in Mexico, had a master's degree in Germany, and they didn't want her because the older people there in the company simply didn't want to speak English. And I was like, they're coding in English, but they don't want to talk with the colleague in English because it's too difficult for them. And that's a big challenge, and I heard that from many different parts already. Is there any way you can do that to convince the companies to change their mindset?
It's people. I think that's not companies, that's really people. And I think you'll always have people that are like that. I think I can speak for myself. I'll probably have a few of those in my greater relative circle. I think a lot of people will have people here as well. Imagine you're going to Canada or the US and you don't speak English, right? You'll probably get very similar sentiments in the workplace as well. So I think language indeed is a key to actually joining something, right? It's just a social factor, right? You need to be able to communicate. If you can't articulate yourself, it's difficult. I think Germany's actually been somewhat good in integrating. I think we had a huge wave, from Southern Europe in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and there were millions of people who came who didn't speak any German, but they worked themselves up very quickly. And I think it's a challenge to be taken up. I would say it doesn't take 10 years. I think you can actually, if you really want to, you can get to a level that's acceptable within a year and a half. It's actually, especially the young people are doing it in no time. I mean, if you're listening to school teachers, they're saying this is amazing. It's amazing how quickly these young people are learning German, and that's really what we need to focus on.
Can I follow up on one thing? Everyone now, raise your hand and take a vow that when someone wants to practice their German with you, that you'll let them. Because what happens is Germans speak such incredible English that if anyone has any English, you immediately switch to English and you speak English. I mean, I was a worker here in Germany and a student, and I studied German for years, and I never learned to speak German. Just didn't. Because you have to actually struggle with it, right? You have to let people learn that language if you want them to speak it.
We'll make the pledge. All right, one more.
My name is Anke Domscheit-Berg. I organized the Refugee Hackathon and spoke in January on the Tech Refugee panel here. I'm also active in local refugee initiatives in Germany. And from that experience, my question is, how can we become better and how to scale it to identify the skills of incoming refugees and match that to demands somewhere else? Especially if we have big camps in big cities. We are a very small city. We know every single refugee and all their skills, and we can take care of it as a civil community. And we find jobs even for farmers. It was possible. But I visited the Tempelhof camp with 3,000 refugees in Berlin, and I met 4 Syrian young refugees who have been there for 7 months. One was an electrician, one was a network engineer, one was a normal engineer, and the 4th one was a baker specified specialization on sweet stuff. They said they have not even a German class in sight. Nobody's ever asking them for their experience and skills and what they want to do. And they said they are so bored stiff, they would do anything, even if it has nothing to do with their professional education. And these are young people we let down somehow, and maybe they lose their motivation one day. So how can we, especially in big cities with too many or many refugees on one place, fill the gap, which in smaller communities is easier to do?
Can I jump in?
Sure, maybe we can all answer, but you can start.
Yeah. I mean, this is like a really easy way for the digital community to get involved. Arm the refugees with a tablet, a standard data set, have them go out, the ones who, and collect that information in their own language so that you have a profile of the refugees. They can do that in the refugee camps. The refugees themselves could be doing that profiling, but you've got to be committed to a standard data set so that you can start to segment who you have and do this kind of really great matching once you know who people are.
Do you want to add to that too?
No, I think there's one more question.
Also,
we have 3 more minutes. So I thought
yeah, but did you want to? Yeah, it was our last question, but you can comment on it. Yeah.
We would love to do that and work at home if I have an online company expanding to Arabic markets. We had many refugees working for us for 6 weeks integration programs, but we were never allowed to keep them. I think that's our
Mm-hmm.
We want to hire them, we want to integrate them, we want to give them a purpose, but we cannot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
this is back to
that comment for everyone who didn't hear was that there's still a lot of bureaucracy and red tape when people sort of want to take on refugees and aren't allowed to. Did you want to add anything to that question also?
You want me to, because it's probably not politically correct.
Please do.
I think
that's even better.
I think there's some states in Germany that do a fantastic job, and there are some that do a horrible job. And I think the experience that you've had, I think Berlin's probably the worst in the nation.
Bavaria, incidentally, the best.
I'm sure it is. But I think there are huge differences between experience that you'll see. I think there are, if you look at Hesse or Bavaria and so on, Saxony doing a fantastic job at really doing that and keeping people busy and so on and so forth, registering, etc. And there's others that are just completely, missing the job, right?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexander and Inge and Jane, for your insight. We're just getting started here, so this is a great way, I think, to have this discussion, and I think we'll just have to go on. And thank you all for your engagement and for your questions.